The air at Fort Sullivan Military Base hung thick with humidity that early June morning, the kind of stifling heat that turned standard-issue uniforms into personal saunas and made every breath feel like drawing in warm soup. Staff Sergeant Olivia Reeves pulled her sedan up to the security checkpoint, her crisp dress blues a stark contrast to the casual attire she'd worn during her 3-month specialized training assignment overseas. The base seemed oddly familiar yet foreign, like returning to a childhood home now occupied by strangers. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Olivia rolled down her window, feeling the rush of marginally cooler air from the guard booth's industrial fan. Her credentials lay ready on the passenger seat, the same credentials that had granted her access to classified facilities across 3 continents. The same credentials that documented her 12 years of exemplary service, multiple combat deployments, and recent promotion to lieutenant colonel that would take effect when she assumed her new command position tomorrow morning. But for now, she was content to arrive quietly, without fanfare, to get the lay of the land before the official ceremony. The military police checkpoint was manned by 3 soldiers, all looking painfully young beneath their patrol caps. Private First Class Jason Miller slouched against the guard booth, scrolling through his phone despite regulations explicitly forbidding personal devices while on duty. Corporal Ryan Davidson leaned on the roof of a nearby patrol vehicle, laughing at something his colleague had just said. Sergeant Olivia Moore, the ranking officer present, was at least making a show of vigilance, though her posture betrayed boredom as she examined the ID of a maintenance worker's truck ahead of Olivia. As the maintenance truck pulled through, Olivia eased her car forward. Sergeant Moore approached with the practiced stride of someone who considered gate duty beneath her abilities. "ID and purpose of visit," she said, the words almost slurring. Together from repetition, Olivia handed over her military ID. Staff Sergeant Olivia Reeves, returning from temporary assignment. "I have orders to report to Colonel Matheson at 0900 tomorrow." Moore glanced at the ID with the cursory attention of someone who'd checked thousands before. Her eyes registered nothing beyond the basics: name, rank, photograph. She didn't notice the special clearance codes, the command designations, or the authorization levels that would have immediately identified Olivia as someone of significance. "Vehicle registration and orders," Moore demanded, her tone shifting from bored to slightly suspicious. Something about Olivia's dress uniform on a sweltering day struck her as odd. Most officers arriving for duty assignments came in less formal attire. "Registration is here," Olivia said, handing over the requested documents. "My orders are classified." "Colonel Matheson has the copies." Moore's eyebrows rose slightly. "Classified orders? For a staff sergeant?" Her voice carried a note of disbelief that bordered on mockery. She turned toward her colleagues. "Hey Davidson, come check this out. Staff Sergeant here says her orders are too classified for us to see." Davidson sauntered over, his movement unhurried and deliberately casual in a way that communicated his disdain more effectively than words. He took Olivia's ID, turning it over in his hands like he was inspecting counterfeit currency. "Staff Sergeant Olivia Reeves," he read aloud, emphasizing her rank with subtle derision, "says she has classified orders that we're not cleared to see." He looked directly at Olivia now, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Do you know who we are, Staff Sergeant? We're military police. We have clearance to check anyone's orders who comes through this gate." Olivia maintained her composure, her expression neutral. "I understand, Corporal. However, my orders come directly from Central Command and are eyes only for Colonel Matheson. I'm happy to wait while you call his office for verification." By now, Private Miller had wandered over as well, phone still in hand though partially concealed behind his back. "What's the holdup?" he asked, barely suppressing a yawn. Staff Sergeant Special Forces here. Thinks her orders are too secret for us to check," Davidson explained, his voice carrying far enough that several other arriving personnel slowed their vehicles to observe the developing situation. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "I never said I was Special Forces," Olivia corrected calmly. "I said my orders are classified, and that Colonel Matheson has them. I'm happy to wait while you verify with his office." Moore crossed her arms, appraising Olivia with growing suspicion. "What unit are you with, Staff Sergeant?" "That information is part of my orders, Sergeant," Olivia replied. "So you can't tell us your unit assignment?" Davidson pressed, his voice rising slightly. "That's not classified information for most personnel. Unless you're making things up." "I'm not making anything up, Corporal. I'm following protocol for my assignment. Please contact Colonel Matheson's office, and we can resolve this quickly." Moore exchanged glances with Davidson, a silent communication. That suggested they were enjoying this unexpected break in their routine. "Step out of the vehicle, Staff Sergeant," Moore ordered, her hand moving to rest on her sidearm in a gesture that was as unnecessary as it was intimidating. Olivia considered her options. She could pull rank now, reveal her true identity and position, and end this charade immediately. But something held her back, a desire to see how these soldiers conducted themselves when they thought no one was watching, how they treated someone they perceived as beneath them in the hierarchy. It would tell her more about the state of discipline at Fort Sullivan than any official briefing. She stepped out of her car with deliberate movements, her polished shoes connecting with the asphalt in a precise manner that spoke of years of military discipline. At 5'7", she wasn't physically imposing, but something in her bearing caused Moore to take an involuntary half-step backward before catching herself. "Is there a problem with my credentials?" Olivia asked, her voice level and controlled. "We need to verify your identity and orders," Moore stated, trying to reclaim authority in her voice. "Without proper documentation, we can't allow you on base." By now, a small crowd had gathered, other military police officers from the checkpoint, a few civilian workers waiting in their vehicles, even a maintenance crew that had paused their work on a nearby fence. The public nature of the confrontation seemed to embolden Moore and her colleagues. "Maybe she's a spy," joked Miller, his phone now openly recording the interaction. "Russian agents are getting better with their American accents these days." "I'm not a spy," Olivia said with the patience of someone explaining a simple concept to a child. "I'm an American soldier returning from assignment. Call Colonel Matheson's office." "We'll get to that," Davidson said, deliberately slow, "after we complete our security protocols." "Your vehicle needs to be searched." Olivia nodded once. "You're welcome to search my vehicle following proper procedures. I have nothing to hide." Davidson and Miller exchanged glances, clearly disappointed by her easy acquiescence. They'd been hoping for resistance that would justify escalation. Moore, however, seemed determined to assert her authority. "Full security protocol," Moore announced, loud enough for the growing audience to hear. "ID verification, vehicle search, and personnel inspection." Olivia stood perfectly still as Moore circled her, examining her uniform with exaggerated scrutiny. "Your insignia doesn't match your paperwork," Moore declared, though this was plainly false. "And your dress blues look off." "My uniform is regulation standard, Sergeant," Olivia replied. "Tailored as permitted under Section 670-1 of Army regulations." "You seem to know your regulations," Davidson commented, rifling through Olivia's car with deliberate carelessness. "For someone who can't even tell us what unit she's assigned to." The humiliation was calculated and public. Moore gestured for Olivia to spread her arms for a pat-down, an unnecessary procedure for military personnel presenting valid ID at a base checkpoint. But Olivia complied, her face a mask of professional detachment that revealed nothing of her thoughts. Miller continued filming, poorly concealing his phone behind a clipboard. "This'll make a great story for the barracks tonight," he muttered. To Davidson, Staff Sergeant Secret Squirrel gets the full treatment. As Moore conducted the pat-down with theatrical thoroughness, she paused at Olivia's breast pocket, where a small distinctive pin was attached, almost hidden by the fold of the uniform. Her fingers froze as recognition dawned in her eyes. "What's this?" she asked, her voice suddenly less certain. "That's a unit designation pin," Olivia answered simply. Moore's face paled slightly. "This looks like... but it can't be." The pin was small and understated, a silver eagle with distinctive markings that only those with certain clearance levels would recognize. It designated Olivia as part of the Army's Elite Command Assessment Unit, a division so classified that most soldiers thought it was merely a military legend. Davidson emerged from searching the car, holding Olivia's briefcase. "Found something interesting," he announced, attempting to force the locked case open. "Classified materials, maybe?" "That case requires Alpha-level clearance to open," Olivia stated calmly. "It has biometric locks that only respond to authorized personnel. I suggest you return it to me immediately." "Alpha-level clearance?" Miller scoffed, still recording. "There's no such thing." But Moore had gone very still, her eyes fixed on the pin, then moving to study Olivia's face with new attention. She noticed for the first time the small scar that ran along Olivia's jawline, the kind that came from close-quarters combat. She saw the calluses on her hands that spoke of thousands of hours of weapons training. Most tellingly, she recognized the quiet confidence of someone who had faced situations far more dangerous than an overzealous gate check. "Return the briefcase, Davidson," Moore ordered, her voice strained. "But we haven't." "Now, Corporal." Moore's sharp command cut through his protest. Davidson reluctantly handed the briefcase back to Olivia, confusion evident on his face. "What's going on?" Moore ignored him, her attention focused entirely on Olivia. "May I see your ID again, ma'am?" The shift to ma'am was subtle but significant. Olivia handed over her ID card once more. This time, Moore examined it carefully, turning it to catch the security hologram embedded in the corner, a feature that revealed additional information under proper scrutiny. Her eyes widened. "Lieutenant Colonel," she whispered, the color draining from her face. Miller lowered his phone, his smugness replaced by confusion. "What did you say?" "Her rank is Lieutenant Colonel, not Staff Sergeant," Moore clarified. Her voice barely audible, effective as of yesterday. Davidson's expression shifted from confusion to dawning horror. "But her uniform shows." "I haven't updated my uniform yet," Olivia explained, her voice still calm and measured. "I wanted to observe base operations before my official introduction tomorrow." She turned to face all three of them. "I'm the new base commander for Fort Sullivan Military Police Division." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the distant sounds of the base seemed to fade away as the implications sank in. Miller's phone slipped from nerveless fingers, clattering. To the ground, Davidson looked like he might be sick. Moore stood rigid, her face a mask of professional devastation. We. Moore struggled to find words. "Ma'am, we were just following security protocols. Were you?" Olivia asked, her voice still eerily calm. "Is it standard protocol to humiliate personnel at checkpoints? To make jokes about spies and secret squirrels? To film encounters on personal devices in violation of base security regulations?" She glanced at Miller's phone on the ground. "To search vehicles without cause and attempt to force open secured materials?" No one answered. No one could. "I believe this interaction has been very educational," Olivia continued. "For all of us." She collected her briefcase and returned to her car with unhurried dignity. "I'll be seeing each of you in my office tomorrow at 700. We'll discuss proper checkpoint procedures in detail." As she started her engine, Olivia looked at the 3 military police officers, still frozen in shock and dawning horror, and delivered her parting words with perfect composure. "I expect better from my military police. And starting tomorrow, I'll ensure I get it." The car pulled away smoothly, leaving behind 3 soldiers whose careers suddenly hung by threads, so thin they were nearly invisible. The gathered crowd dispersed quickly, no one wanting to be associated with what they just witnessed. Word would spread through Fort Sullivan before Olivia even reached her temporary quarters. The new MP commander had arrived incognito and been subjected to a security check that violated virtually every protocol in the book. What none of them knew yet, what would become apparent in the coming days, was that Olivia Reeves hadn't just been promoted because of her service record. She'd been specifically chosen to overhaul Fort Sullivan's military police division after multiple reports of misconduct, power abuse, and declining standards. What had happened at the gate was exactly the kind of behavior she'd been sent to correct. And correction was about to begin. Lieutenant Colonel Olivia Reeves stood motionless beneath the shower's spray, letting scalding water sluice away the residual tension from the checkpoint incident. Her temporary quarters were Spartan but functional, standard officer accommodations, with none of the upgrades she'd be entitled to as base commander. She preferred it this way. The simplicity reminded her of deployments, of the essence of military service stripped down to necessities. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Toweling off, Olivia studied her reflection in the bathroom mirror. At 38, her face carried the quiet confidence of a woman who had faced combat, bureaucracy, and the unique challenges of being female in a hierarchy still dominated by men. The scar along her jawline, a souvenir from an ambush outside Kandahar, had faded to a thin silver line. She traced it absently, remembering the young lieutenant who'd pulled her to safety that day. He hadn't survived the night. This assignment would be different from anything she'd done before. Not more dangerous, nothing could match the cold. Fear of night operations in hostile territory, but perhaps more complicated. Reforming an entrenched culture of misconduct required different tactics than battlefield strategy. She couldn't simply issue orders and expect compliance. She needed to change hearts and minds, to instill a sense of duty and honor in officers who had forgotten why they served. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Wrapping herself in a robe, she checked the peephole to find Colonel Matheson. Standing in the hallway, his weathered face set in grim lines. "Colonel," she greeted him after opening the door. "I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow's ceremony." "Word travels fast on a military base, Olivia," he replied, stepping inside. At her gesture, especially when it involves the new commander being detained at the checkpoint, Olivia smiled thinly. Not detained, just thoroughly vetted. "Those 3 MPs are having the worst day of their careers," Matheson said, declining her offer of coffee with a shake of his head. "Sergeant Moore has already submitted her letter of resignation." "Deny it," Olivia said immediately. Matheson raised an eyebrow. "You want to keep her?" "I want to reform her. All of them." Olivia poured herself coffee, adding nothing to the strong black brew. "Resignation is the easy way out. I didn't come here to purge the ranks, Thomas. I came to fix them." Colonel Thomas Matheson had known Olivia for 15 years, had watched her rise through the ranks with a combination of tactical brilliance and unwavering integrity. They'd served together in Afghanistan, had faced enemy fire side by side, had attended too many memorial services for fallen comrades. If anyone could reshape Fort Sullivan's troubled MP division, it was her. "The whole base is buzzing about." "What happened?" he said, watching her carefully. "Some say you set them up." "I didn't." She sipped her coffee. "But I didn't correct their assumption about my rank either. I wanted to see how they operated when they thought no one important." was watching, and they failed spectacularly. She set down her mug, but failure is where learning begins. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Matheson nodded slowly. Your command style was always unconventional. Effective. She corrected with a hint of a smile. I need the personnel files for the entire MP division by tonight. Full records, including disciplinary actions, commendations, and performance reviews. Already on your laptop, Matheson replied, along with the last 5 years of incident reports and civilian complaints. How bad is it, Thomas? Really? Matheson's silence was answer enough. Finally, he spoke. They were a good unit once. One of the best, but the last commander let standards slip. Discipline became inconsistent. The wrong behaviors were rewarded. And now, he gestured vaguely, and now they humiliate fellow soldiers for sport and film it on their phones. Olivia finished. Well, that ends tomorrow. After Matheson left, Olivia spent hours reviewing the files, building mental profiles of each officer under her new command. The patterns were clear: a gradual erosion of standards, increasing civilian complaints about heavy-handed tactics, declining morale among junior officers, and a command structure that rewarded aggression over judgment. By 2 a.m., she had formulated her approach. It wouldn't be quick or easy. Cultural change never was, but she had a plan. At precisely 0655 hours, Olivia entered her new office through the private entrance, avoiding the main bullpen where officers would be gathering for the morning briefing. The office was impersonal, stripped of the previous commander's belongings, but not yet bearing any mark of her presence. That would come later. For now, its emptiness served her purpose. She arranged 3 chairs in front of her desk, each positioned, so the morning sun would hit the occupant's eyes. A small psychological advantage, perhaps, but Olivia believed in using every tool at her disposal. Then she waited, reviewing her notes on the 3 officers who would arrive in moments. At exactly 0700, a tentative knock sounded at her door. "Enter," she called, her voice carrying the calm authority that had served her well in crisis situations across 3 continents. The door opened to reveal Sergeant Moore, Corporal Davidson, and Private Miller. Their uniforms were immaculate. Clearly they'd spent considerable time ensuring every detail was perfect. Their faces were masks of professional neutrality, though the underlying tension was evident in their stiff postures and clenched jaws. "Reporting as ordered, ma'am," Moore said, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "Take a seat, all of you," Olivia instructed, gesturing to the 3 chairs. They sat in unison, backs rigid, eyes forward, hands placed carefully on their knees, the posture of soldiers expecting disciplinary action. Olivia let the silence stretch, a technique she'd learned from a hostage negotiator years ago. Silence created pressure. Pressure revealed character. She watched as Miller's foot began to tap nervously, as Davidson's fingers twitched almost imperceptibly, as Moore maintained her composure, but couldn't prevent a slight tightening around her eyes. "Do you know why you're here?" Olivia finally asked. "To be disciplined for our conduct yesterday, ma'am," Moore answered promptly. "Is that what you think this is? A disciplinary meeting?" The 3 exchanged confused glances. "Yesterday," Olivia continued, "I observed 3 military police officers violating at least 7 regulations while processing an arriving soldier. I witnessed unprofessional conduct, security breaches, and a fundamental failure to uphold the standards expected of those entrusted with maintaining order on this base." She stood, walking around her desk to face them directly, removing the barrier between them. "By all rights, I should be processing your transfers this morning. Or worse, your discharges." She let that sink in before continuing. "But that would be the easy solution. And I've never been interested in easy solutions. Miller swallowed audibly. Davidson's eyes widened slightly. Moore remained still, her gaze fixed forward. Instead, Olivia said, I want to understand how 3 soldiers, all with commendable service records before the last 18 months, became the officers I encountered yesterday. This was clearly not what they had expected. Moore spoke first, her voice carefully controlled. Ma'am, there's no excuse for our behavior. We failed to maintain professional standards and showed disrespect to a superior officer. A textbook response, Sergeant, Olivia noted. But I'm not interested in textbook responses. I want to know what happened to this unit. Because what I witnessed yesterday wasn't isolated misconduct. It was symptomatic of a cultural problem. Davidson cleared his throat. Ma'am, if I may speak freely? Olivia nodded. These contain your new assignments, she said, handing one to each officer. Effective immediately. They opened the folders with visible trepidation. Community liaison? Moore read aloud, confusion evident in her voice. Youth Outreach Program, Davidson said simultaneously. Base Civilian Relations Coordinator? Miller's voice cracked slightly. For the next 30 days, Olivia confirmed, you will be the face of Fort Sullivan's military police in the surrounding community. Sergeant Moore, you'll work with local government officials to address their concerns about military-civilian interactions. Corporal Davidson, you'll run our youth program, teaching local high school students about military service and values. Private Miller, you'll coordinate with local businesses on security concerns and community integration. The bewilderment on their faces was evident. This isn't punishment detail, Olivia clarified. This is rehabilitation. You've forgotten what it means to protect and serve. You've forgotten that authority is granted to you for the benefit of others, not for your own gratification. These assignments will remind you. And after 30 days? Moore asked cautiously. After 30 days, I'll reevaluate. If you've demonstrated growth, you'll return to regular duties with a clean slate. If not, she let the implication hang in the air. This is your opportunity to remember why you became military police in the first place, Olivia continued. I'm betting that it wasn't so you could intimidate fellow soldiers at checkpoints. She stood, signaling that the meeting was concluding. You start your new assignments this afternoon. I expect daily reports. And I'll be making unannounced visits to observe your progress. Yes, ma'am, they responded in unison, standing at attention. One more thing, Olivia added as they turned to leave. I believe in second chances. I don't believe in third ones. Is that clear? Crystal clear, ma'am, Moore answered for all of them. After they left, Olivia allowed herself a moment of doubt. Her approach was unorthodox. Many commanders would have simply transferred the problem officers or processed their discharges. Clean, simple, efficient. But she hadn't built her reputation on doing things the easy way. The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of meetings, briefings, and the formal change of command ceremony where she officially assumed her position. Throughout it all, she observed the MP officers under her command, noting their interactions, their habits, the subtle hierarchies that existed beneath the official chain of command. By evening, word of her unusual punishment for Moore, Davidson, and Miller had spread throughout the division. As she walked through the main bullpen toward her office, conversations hushed and eyes followed her, some curious, some wary, some openly hostile. She had disrupted the established order. That never came without resistance. Major James Sullivan, her second in command and a 20-year veteran of military police operations, waited in her office with the day's incident reports. Interesting approach with those 3, he commented without preamble. Too soft? She asked, accepting the tablet he handed her, unexpectedly. Rehabilitative, he replied carefully. Previous command would have had them packing their bags. I didn't take this position to continue previous command's methods, Olivia said. scanning the reports. Besides, those three aren't the problem. They're symptoms of the problem. Sullivan raised an eyebrow. And the problem is? Leadership failure, she said simply. They became what they were allowed to become. What they were encouraged to become. Sullivan nodded slowly. Some won't adapt to your way of doing things. Then they'll find themselves pursuing careers elsewhere, Olivia replied without looking up from the reports. This isn't a democracy, Major. It's a military unit. I expect compliance with my standards, but I'd prefer commitment to them. And the difference is? Now she did look up, fixing him with the steady gaze that had unnerved Taliban commanders during interrogations. Compliance is following orders because you must. Commitment is following them because you believe in them. After Sullivan left, Olivia remained in her office, reviewing personnel files and incident reports until well past midnight. Patterns emerged, certain officers with disproportionate numbers of use-of-force incidents, specific shifts where civilian complaints spiked, training deficiencies that had never been addressed. The problems were systemic, but not unfixable. As she finally prepared to leave, her phone buzzed with a text from Colonel Matheson. Community already noticing your 3 special projects. Mayor called to ask if Moore was being punished by having to meet with him. Told him it was a promotion. Olivia smiled slightly. The ripples were spreading faster than she'd anticipated. Good. Change required momentum. The next morning, she arrived at the base checkpoint at 0530, 30 minutes before shift change, when attention to detail typically waned and shortcuts became tempting. She parked her car 100 yards away and approached on foot, observing the night shift's procedures from a distance before making her presence known. The checkpoint was staffed by officers she hadn't yet met, Corporal Jenkins, Private Williams, and Sergeant Rodriguez. Their processing of incoming maintenance workers was efficient but impersonal, lacking both the hostility she'd experienced and the respectful professionalism she expected. She approached openly, her commander insignia clearly visible on her uniform. The reaction was immediate: straightened postures, quick salutes, nervous glances. "Good morning," she greeted them. "I'm Lieutenant Colonel Reeves. I'll be observing checkpoint procedures this morning." "Yes, ma'am," Rodriguez responded, clearly taken aback by the commander's unexpected appearance. "Any particular aspect you're interested in?" "Everything," Olivia replied simply, positioning herself where she could observe without interfering. "Carry on as normal." For the next hour, she watched silently as they processed incoming personnel, civilian contractors arriving for early shifts, officers returning from overnight leave, delivery vehicles bringing supplies. Their efficiency was admirable, but she noted multiple procedural lapses. IDs checked too quickly to verify security features. Vehicles waved through with cursory inspections. Documentation accepted without proper validation. When the morning shift arrived to relieve them, she gathered all 6 officers together. "I observed 23 procedural violations in the past hour," she stated without preamble. "None malicious, but all potentially significant." She detailed each lapse methodically, watching their expressions shift from defensive to concerned, as they recognized the security implications of what they dismissed as harmless shortcuts. "Efficiency matters," she acknowledged, "but security matters more. And respectful treatment of base personnel and visitors matters most of all. Because respect builds trust, and trust is the foundation of security." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I'm implementing new checkpoint protocols, effective immediately. Each shift will be randomly observed twice weekly. Evaluations will focus on thoroughness, professionalism, and respectful interaction, not processing speed." The officers exchanged uneasy glances, recognizing that their world had just changed fundamentally. "Questions?" Olivia asked. Corporal Jenkins hesitantly raised his hand. "Ma'am, will this affect our performance metrics?" The previous command emphasized throughput numbers. Your metrics are changing, Olivia confirmed. Quality over quantity. Effectiveness over speed. And zero tolerance for the kind of conduct I experienced 2 days ago. As she walked away, she heard one officer whisper to another, "So it's true, she's the one they detained at the gate. And now she's reforming the entire division because of it," came the reply. Olivia allowed herself a small smile. Let them think that. Let them believe her changes stemmed from personal vendetta rather than professional assessment. Sometimes perception was a useful tool, even when inaccurate, because the truth was more complex. She hadn't come to Fort Sullivan because of a chance encounter at a checkpoint. She'd been sent specifically to address a division in decline, a unit whose deteriorating standards threatened the reputation and effectiveness of military police corps wide. And she was just getting started. 1 week into her command, Lieutenant Colonel Olivia Reeves sat in the rarely used observation room above the main training facility, watching as Fort Sullivan's military police officers conducted their morning physical training. From this vantage point, separated by one-way glass, she could observe without her presence affecting their behavior, a tactical advantage she'd employed since arriving. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The patterns were evident even in something as basic as PT. Officers naturally segregated into cliques based on shift assignments and personal relationships rather than functional teams. Senior officers pushed themselves only when supervisors were watching. Junior officers mimicked this behavior, creating a culture of performative effort rather than genuine commitment to excellence. Olivia made notes in her tablet, adding to the comprehensive assessment she'd been building. The issues ran deeper than checkpoint procedures or individual misconduct. The entire division had lost its sense of purpose and pride, forgotten that they weren't just enforcers of rules, but guardians of a community, exemplars of military values. Her phone buzzed with a text from Major Sullivan. "Community center in 20 minutes? Your special projects are making waves," she smiled slightly. Time to see how her 3 problem officers were adapting to their new assignments. 20 minutes later, she pulled into the Fort Sullivan Community Center parking lot. The modest building served as a hub for military-civilian integration programs, everything from youth activities to job fairs for military spouses. Today, it hosted Corporal Davidson's first leadership session with the high school ROTC program. Olivia entered quietly through the side door, positioning herself at the back of the room where she could observe without disrupting. Davidson stood before 20 teenagers in partial ROTC uniforms, his own military police uniform impeccably pressed. His posture was rigid, uncomfortable, clearly struggling with this new role. "Military bearing," he was saying, pacing stiffly before the far assembled students, "is about discipline. It's about presenting yourself as a professional at all times." The teenagers watched with varying levels of interest. Some sat attentively, others slouched in their chairs. A few whispered among themselves. Davidson's discomfort was palpable as he tried to maintain their attention. "The military operates on a chain of command," he continued, his voice taking on the rehearsed quality of someone reciting rather than engaging. "Each person knows their place, and, sir," a young woman in the front row raised her hand. "Is that why you became an MP? For the chain of command?" Davidson faltered. This clearly wasn't in his prepared remarks. No, that's not why I joined." "Then why did you?" the student pressed. Olivia watched with interest as genuine. Emotion flickered across Davidson's face, a crack in the professional mask he'd been maintaining. "I joined because my grandfather was military police in Vietnam," he said after a moment, his voice softer now, more authentic. "He told me stories about protecting his fellow soldiers, about maintaining order in chaos. He made it sound like the most honorable job in the military. The students were watching him more attentively now, responding to his sincerity. I wanted that, to be the person others relied on when things got dangerous or confusing. To be the steady presence that maintained order. Davidson's expression shifted, a shadow of something like regret crossing his features. Sometimes. I think I've forgotten that part of it. The room had gone completely silent. Even the previously disinterested students were now fully engaged. What made you forget? Asked another student, a young man near the back. Davidson looked up, seeming surprised by the question. For a moment, Olivia thought he might retreat into military platitudes. Instead, he did something she hadn't expected. He told the truth. It gets easy to focus on the power rather than the responsibility, he admitted. To start seeing the uniform as something that sets you apart and above, rather than something that connects you to a tradition of service. The conversation that followed was raw, honest, and exactly what these young people needed to hear. Not polished recruitment speech, but the real struggles and rewards of military service from someone who'd experienced both. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Olivia slipped out before Davidson noticed her presence. She had seen enough. The rehabilitation she'd hoped for was already beginning. Not through punishment, but through reconnection with the core values that had brought him to service in the first place. Her next stop was the mayor's office, where Sergeant Moore was scheduled to meet with local officials about community concerns regarding military police practices. She arrived just as the meeting was ending, positioning herself unobtrusively in the reception area as Moore emerged from the conference room alongside Mayor Harrison and 2 city council members. I appreciate your candor, Sergeant, the mayor was saying, his expression serious but not hostile. It's refreshing to hear someone from the base acknowledge these issues directly. The problems are real, sir, Moore replied, her usual defensive posture notably absent. And we haven't been addressing them properly. That's going to change. You've said that before, countered one of the council members, an older woman whose skepticism was evident in her tone. Every time there's an incident, we get promises of change that never materialize. Moore nodded, accepting the criticism without defensiveness. You're right, Ms. Rodriguez. We've failed to follow through in the past. But our new commander is implementing structural changes, not just making promises. She glanced down at her notes. I've documented every concern raised today, and I'll be presenting a comprehensive response plan by next week. The officials exchanged surprised glances, clearly not accustomed to this level of accountability from base representatives. I hope you understand, Moore continued, that rebuilding trust will take time. We can't undo years of problematic interactions overnight, but we're committed to the process. We'll be watching closely, Mayor Harrison said, though his tone had softened somewhat. The relationship between this town and the base matters to everyone. It matters to us too, Moore assured him, more than we've shown recently. As the officials departed, Moore remained in the reception area, reviewing her notes with a focus that suggested genuine commitment rather than performative compliance. She hadn't noticed Olivia's presence, giving the commander another moment to observe her unguarded behavior. What Olivia saw was promising, not just a soldier following orders, but an officer reconnecting with the deeper purpose of her role. Moore wasn't just going through the motions. She was engaged with the substantive issues, showing the kind of ownership that couldn't be commanded, only inspired. Olivia left without revealing herself. Her final stop was the local business district, where Private Miller was conducting his first community security consultation with shop owners who operated near the base. She found him outside a small diner, engaged in conversation with an elderly man who appeared to be the proprietor. Unlike his usual cocky demeanor, Miller was listening attentively, occasionally making notes on his tablet. "The problem isn't just the rowdiness," the shop owner was saying. "Young soldiers will be young soldiers. I was one myself back in the day. It's the attitude when we call the MPs for help, like we're bothering them with something trivial." "That's not acceptable," Miller replied, his typical bravado replaced by professional concern. "Your business deserves our respect and protection. What specific improvements would make the biggest difference for you?" The conversation continued, with Miller collecting detailed feedback about response times, officer attitudes, and specific incidents that had eroded trust between local businesses and military police. No dismissiveness, no defensiveness, just professional engagement with community concerns. When the shop owner returned inside, Miller moved to the next business on his list, unaware of his commander observing from across the street. Olivia had seen enough. The transformation wasn't complete, but it had begun, and it was genuine. Back at her office, Olivia found Major Sullivan waiting with the weekly incident reports. His expression suggested something unusual had occurred. "Problem?" she asked, accepting the tablet he handed her. "Not exactly," Sullivan replied. "Overall incidents are down 20% compared to last week. Civilian complaints down 35%. "That's good news." "It's unprecedented," Sullivan corrected. "We've never seen a drop that significant in such a short time frame." Olivia scrolled through the reports, noting the details beyond the statistics. Officer comments were more thorough and professional. Follow-up actions were more comprehensive. Even the language used to describe civilians and fellow soldiers showed greater respect. "Word is spreading about your expectations," Sullivan explained. "After what happened with Moore, Davidson, and Miller, and your direct observation of checkpoint procedures, officers are adjusting their behavior." "Compliance," Olivia noted. "Not necessarily commitment yet." "It's a start," Sullivan pointed out. "And speaking of your 3 special projects, I've been getting feedback about them as well." "I've seen them in action today," Olivia said. "Progress is evident." "It's more than progress," Sullivan countered. "It's transformation." Davidson actually asked for additional time with the ROTC program, volunteered for it. Moore has been researching community policing models on her own time. And Miller has started a group chat with local business owners to improve communication channels. Olivia allowed herself a small smile. They're remembering why they became military police in the first place. "Your approach is working," Sullivan acknowledged, "though not everyone is happy about the changes." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Elaboration needed, Major." "Captain Reynolds and his team," Sullivan explained. "They've been the primary enforcement group for the last 2 years, the ones with the highest number of citations and arrests. Your new policies are cramping their style." "Their style needed cramping," Olivia replied evenly. "Their statistics looked impressive on paper, but the methods were problematic at best, potentially illegal at worst. They're organizing resistance," Sullivan warned. "Nothing overt yet, but there's talk. Complaints about going soft, undermining authority, coddling civilians." Olivia nodded, unsurprised. Cultural change never comes without resistance, especially from those who benefited most from the previous culture. Monitor the situation, but don't intervene yet. Let's see how they choose to express their dissatisfaction. After Sullivan departed, Olivia returned to her assessment document, adding observations from the day's activities. The picture was becoming clearer, both the depth of the problems and the pathways to solutions. Fort Sullivan's Military Police Division had lost its way gradually through a series of small compromises and shifting priorities. The recovery would follow a similar pattern, not through dramatic gestures, but through consistent reinforcement of core values. 2 days later, the first test of her new approach arrived in the form of an incident at the main gate. A civilian contractor had arrived without proper documentation, a common occurrence that previously would have resulted in aggressive confrontation, humiliation, and potential barring from base access. Under Olivia's new protocols, the situation was handled differently. Professional but respectful explanation of requirements, assistance in contacting the contractor's supervisor to verify authorization, and clear guidance on obtaining proper credentials for future visits. The entire interaction was recorded on the checkpoint's official camera system, a new requirement Olivia had implemented to replace the unauthorized personal recordings that had previously been common practice. The footage showed officers following procedures precisely while maintaining professional courtesy throughout. What made this incident noteworthy was that the checkpoint team was led by Captain Reynolds, the officer Sullivan had identified as most resistant to the new policies. Despite his private complaints, his public performance adhered perfectly to Olivia's standards. Compliance without commitment. But compliance was a starting point. Olivia reviewed the footage carefully, noting both the letter-perfect adherence to protocol and the subtle signs of resistance, the slightly mechanical tone, the bare minimum of courtesy, the technical adherence without embracing the spirit of the new approach. She called Captain Reynolds to her office the following morning. "Your handling of the contractor incident yesterday was procedurally correct," she began once he was seated across from her desk. "Every protocol followed precisely." "Thank you, ma'am," Reynolds replied, his expression carefully neutral though. His posture remained rigid with barely concealed tension. "But something was missing," Olivia continued. "Something I can't write into protocols or mandate through orders." Reynolds' jaw tightened slightly. "I'm not sure I understand, ma'am." "You followed the letter of the policies but missed their purpose," Olivia explained. "Military police aren't just rule enforcers, Captain. We're the face of military values to both the base community and civilians. We set the tone for how the military is perceived." "With all due respect, ma'am," Reynolds countered, his professional veneer thinning, "we're responsible for security, first and foremost. Making people feel good is secondary to keeping them safe. Is that a dichotomy we need to accept?" Olivia asked. "To protect," Olivia repeated, "not just to control. There's a fundamental difference between those motivations. One serves others, the other serves oneself." She turned back to face him directly. "I've reviewed your service record, Captain. Before the last 2 years, you had an exemplary career. Multiple commendations for judgment and leadership. Consistently positive evaluations from both superiors and subordinates." Reynolds looked away, discomfort evident in his posture. "Something changed," Olivia pressed. "I'd like to understand what." The silence stretched between them, tension building until Reynolds finally spoke, his voice lower than before. "2 years ago, we had an incident at the North Checkpoint. A civilian ran the gate. Turned out he was drunk, not a threat, but we didn't know that at the time. My team followed protocol, verbal warnings, then escalating response. No one was seriously injured, but the civilian filed a complaint, claimed excessive force." He paused, the memory clearly still raw. "We were cleared of wrongdoing, followed every procedure exactly. But the previous commander called me in afterward, said we'd been too soft in our initial response. Said next time it might be a real threat and hesitation could cost lives." "And that changed your approach," Olivia surmised. Reynolds nodded. "He instituted new metrics, new evaluation criteria. Emphasized proactive enforcement, dominant presence. Officers who showed the most assertive statistics got the promotions, the preferred assignments, the recognition. So you adapted." "I did what was expected," Reynolds said, a hint of defensiveness returning to his tone. "What the command structure rewarded," Olivia nodded slowly. "And in the process, lost sight of why you became an MP in the first place." Reynolds didn't answer, but his silence was confirmation enough. "The metrics are changing, Captain," Olivia said. "Because the mission hasn't changed. but our understanding of how to achieve it has evolved. Security through respect and integration, not intimidation and separation. She returned to her desk, pulling up a file on her tablet. I'm assigning you as liaison to the Community Integration Committee, civilian and military representatives, working on improving relations between the base and surrounding communities. Your first meeting is tomorrow. Reynolds looked up, surprise evident in his expression. Ma'am, I'm not sure I'm the right officer for that assignment. You're exactly the right officer, Olivia countered. Because you need to see the consequences of the approach you've been implementing. You need to hear directly from the people affected by it. She held his gaze steadily. This isn't punishment, Captain. It's recalibration, a chance to remember. That protection means more than just enforcement. After Reynolds departed, Olivia returned to her assessment document, adding notes from their conversation. The picture was becoming clearer, not just of what had gone wrong, but of the path forward. Reynolds wasn't a bad officer. He was a good officer who had adapted to a flawed system of incentives and expectations. Change the system, and you could recover the officer he had once been. That evening, as Olivia walked through the base housing area, another of her unannounced observation routines, she encountered Sergeant Moore returning from her community liaison duties. Moore saluted crisply, then hesitated as if wanting to speak further. Something on your mind, Sergeant? Olivia asked. Yes, ma'am, Moore replied. I wanted to thank you for not accepting my resignation letter, Moore said. For giving me the chance to fix what I helped break. Olivia studied her face, seeing genuine emotion where there had previously been only defensive professionalism. Finding your way back to your core values, Sergeant? Yes, ma'am, Moore confirmed. Working with the community these past days. Hearing their concerns, seeing the consequences of how we've been operating, it's been clarifying. In what way? Moore considered her answer carefully. I joined the MPs to protect people, all people, not just those in uniform. Somewhere along the way, I started seeing civilians as obstacles or problems rather than the people we're ultimately here to serve. She straightened her posture, professional pride evident in her bearing. I'm requesting to continue community liaison duties after my 30-day assignment ends, ma'am. I believe I can make a difference there. Olivia nodded, satisfaction warming. Her voice, request approved, Sergeant. The position is yours for as long as you bring that attitude to it. As Moore continued on her way, Olivia allowed herself a moment of cautious optimism. The transformation was spreading, from individual officers to the wider culture. Compliance was evolving into commitment. The division was remembering its purpose. The true test, however, was yet to come. The rain started at 3 a.m., a relentless downpour that turned Fort Sullivan's parade grounds into shallow lakes and sent rivulets of muddy water cascading down the hillsides toward the neighboring town of Sullivan Creek. By dawn, base personnel were sandbagging critical areas while monitoring weather reports that promised no relief for at least 24 hours. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Lieutenant Colonel Olivia Reeves had been awake since the first emergency alert, coordinating with base engineering to assess potential flooding risks. The base itself sat on high ground, relatively protected from serious flood damage, but Sullivan Creek occupied the valley below, directly in the path of water, draining from the 10,000-acre military installation. Latest projections? She asked Major Sullivan as they stood in the Emergency Operations Center, surrounded by maps and weather displays. Creek will exceed flood stage by noon, Sullivan replied grimly. Town's evacuation plan is already in motion, but they're short on personnel and resources. What about their emergency services? Fire departments already deploying their high water vehicles. Police are going door to door in the lowest areas. but they've requested military assistance, especially for traffic control and evacuation support. Olivia nodded, studying the map where blue shading indicated projected flood zones. This will be our first major community support operation since the policy changes. Make sure everyone understands, this isn't about enforcement, it's about service and protection. Who do you want to deploy? Sullivan asked, tablet ready for her instructions. Olivia considered for only a moment before making her decision. Captain Reynolds and his team for traffic control at major intersections. They have the most experience with large-scale operations. Sergeant Moore to coordinate with local authorities. She's built rapport through her liaison work. Davidson and Miller for direct evacuation assistance. They've gained community trust through their outreach programs. Sullivan raised an eyebrow. You're putting all your special projects on the front lines? I'm putting my best people where they'll be most effective, Olivia corrected. Dispatch them immediately, full emergency equipment. I'll join the command post at Sullivan Creek City Hall. Within an hour, Fort Sullivan's military police were deploying throughout the threatened areas of Sullivan Creek, not as an occupying force, but as partners in protection. The transformation in approach was immediately evident to local residents, many of whom had experienced previous interactions with military police that left them wary and resentful. Captain Reynolds established traffic control points at key intersections, managing evacuation routes with efficiency but also unexpected compassion. When an elderly couple became confused by detour instructions, instead of the impatient redirection that might have occurred months earlier, Reynolds personally escorted them to the correct route, ensuring they understood where to go for emergency shelter. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sergeant Moore integrated seamlessly with local emergency management, her recent work as community liaison proving invaluable. She knew the town officials by name, understood their emergency protocols, and could translate between military and civilian terminology to ensure smooth coordination. Davidson and Miller led teams conducting door-to-door welfare checks in the areas most immediately threatened by rising waters. Their recent community engagement had built enough trust that residents welcomed their assistance rather than viewing it with suspicion. By midday, the creek had indeed exceeded flood stage, with water lapping at doorsteps in the lowest neighborhoods. The rain continued unabated, transforming streets into shallow rivers and overwhelming drainage systems. Emergency shelters were filling rapidly as residents heeded evacuation orders. Olivia moved between coordination points, observing her officers in action while providing direct support where needed. At the main evacuation center, Sullivan Creek High School, she found Private Miller, organizing transportation for displaced families who needed to reach relatives in neighboring communities. "Getting everything you need?" she asked, noting his efficiency and the grateful expressions of those he was helping. "Yes, ma'am," Miller replied, a stark contrast to the cocky soldier who had filmed her humiliation just weeks earlier. "We've established a tracking system to ensure no one falls through the cracks. Each family gets logged with their destination and contact information so we can follow up later." "Your initiative?" Olivia asked. Miller nodded. "After talking with local business owners these past weeks, I realized how important it is for people to know someone's looking out for them specifically, not just managing them as a crowd." "Good work, Private," Olivia said simply, but her approval was evident. As afternoon approached, the Weather Service issued an updated warning. A section of hillside above Sullivan Creek's eastern neighborhood showed signs of potential mudslide. The area needed immediate evacuation, but roads were increasingly impassable. "We can't get emergency vehicles through," the Sullivan Creek police chief explained during the emergency briefing at City Hall. "Water's too deep for standard vehicles, and our high water rescue trucks are already deployed in the western quadrant. My team can handle it, Captain Reynolds volunteered, stepping forward. We have 4 MRAPs at the base perimeter that can navigate those conditions. The mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles were massive military transports designed for combat zones, not the equipment typically used for civilian evacuation. In the past, deploying such imposing vehicles into a civilian community would have reinforced the militaristic, occupying force image that had damaged community relations. Are you sure that's the right approach, Captain? Olivia asked, watching him carefully. This was a test not of his competence, but of his understanding of the division's reformed mission. Reynolds nodded confidently. The MRAPs can handle the water depth and potential debris, ma'am. But we'll deploy with minimal tactical equipment, no weapons, standard uniforms, rather than tactical gear. We'll present as rescue personnel, not military force. It was exactly the right answer, balancing operational necessity with community sensitivity. Olivia nodded her approval. Make it happen. Within 30 minutes, 4 massive military vehicles were carefully navigating flooded streets toward the threatened neighborhood, their imposing presence transformed by the clear rescue markings hastily painted on their sides and the deliberately non-threatening demeanor of their crews. Reynolds led the operation personally, coordinating evacuations with a combination of efficiency and empathy that reflected his reconnection with the core values that had once defined his service. Each family was treated with respect and dignity. Each home approached not as a target, but as a sanctuary in need of protection. As the evacuation progressed, Olivia received an urgent call from Sergeant Moore at the Emergency Operations Center. Ma'am, we have a situation at Cedar Ridge Retirement Home. They've lost backup power, and they have 16 residents on oxygen support. Local EMAs can't reach them due to flooded access roads. Options? Olivia asked, already moving toward her vehicle. Corporal Davidson suggests we can reach them from the Northeast Service Road. It's on higher ground and might still be passable with the right vehicles. I'm on my way to your location. Have Davidson prepare a rescue team. When Olivia arrived at the Emergency Operations Center, she found Davidson already organizing equipment, portable oxygen units, medical supplies, and emergency transport preparations. The service road is our best option, he explained, pointing to the map. It's narrow and rough, but it stays above the floodplain. Our tactical vehicles can handle it, but we'll need medical personnel. Local hospital can provide nurses. Moore added, but they need transportation to the site. Coordinate with Captain Reynolds, Olivia instructed. Get 1 MRAP redirected here for the medical team, then proceed to Cedar Ridge. I'll join the rescue team. Davidson looked surprised. You're coming on the mission, ma'am. I don't ask my people to take risks I wouldn't take myself, Corporal. The operation proceeded with the precision of a military mission, but the compassion of a humanitarian effort. Reynolds secured the medical team and delivered them to the staging area. Davidson led the advance party to assess access routes. Miller coordinated with emergency shelters to prepare for elderly residents with medical needs. When they reached Cedar Ridge Retirement Home, they found a building in crisis. Without power for climate control, the temperature was rising to dangerous levels for vulnerable residents. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across anxious faces. Staff members were manually assisting residents with breathing difficulties, taking turns hand-pumping emergency oxygen devices. We have transport for 16 critical patients and can accommodate 20 more ambulatory residents, Olivia announced to the facility director. We'll need to move quickly. What about the rest? The director asked, gesturing to dozens of elderly residents gathered in the common areas. We have 64 people total. Olivia turned to Davidson. Options, Corporal? Davidson considered for only a moment before responding with the confidence of an officer who understood his mission beyond mere procedure. We evacuate in waves, ma'am. Critical patients first. than those needing mobility assistance. We can establish a temporary shelter at the community center. It's on high ground and has generator power. Once everyone's stable, we coordinate with emergency management for longer-term placement. The evacuation proceeded methodically, each resident treated with dignity and care that transcended basic emergency procedures. Reynolds organized vehicle rotations to maximize efficiency. Moore coordinated with emergency services to ensure medical support at the reception center. Miller established a tracking system to ensure families could locate their loved ones. Throughout it all, Olivia observed her officers with growing pride. This wasn't compliance with new protocols or performative respect. This was genuine commitment to service values. These were military police officers who had rediscovered why they had chosen this path in the first place. As evening approached, the rain finally began to slacken, though floodwaters continued to rise as runoff from the mountains fed swollen creeks. Emergency operations transitioned from evacuation to sustainment, ensuring those displaced had shelter, food, and information about their homes and possessions. At the main shelter in Sullivan Creek High School gymnasium, Olivia found Captain Reynolds organizing security patrols, not to control the evacuees, but to protect their abandoned neighborhoods from potential looting. "We're coordinating with local police," he explained as she approached. "Joint patrols, shared communication channels, clear delineation of authority. Everything by the book, but with flexibility to address civilian concerns." "Your idea?" Olivia asked. "Learned it from you, ma'am," Reynolds replied. "Security through integration, not intimidation. These people need to know someone's protecting their homes while they're displaced." Across the gymnasium, Olivia spotted Miller helping an elderly man find comfortable seating, and Davidson organizing a play area for children whose families had been evacuated. Not because regulations required it, but because they recognized the human needs behind the emergency protocols. Later that night, as emergency operations continued, Olivia joined Mayor Harrison in the makeshift command center. At City Hall, the mayor looked exhausted but grateful as he reviewed the latest situation reports. "I've seen the military assist with emergencies before, Colonel," he said quietly, "but never quite like this. Your people aren't just following orders. They seem to genuinely care." "That's because they do," Olivia replied. "They've remembered that the uniform represents service, not just authority." Harrison studied her thoughtfully. "The change in just these few weeks has been remarkable, from adversaries to partners. How did you manage it?" Olivia considered her answer carefully. "I didn't force change. I created conditions where they could rediscover their original purpose. Most people join military service, especially military police, because they want to protect others. Sometimes they just need to be reminded of that core motivation." "Whatever you did," Harrison said, "it's made all the difference today. There are people safe tonight who might not have been if your officers had approached this emergency with their previous attitudes." By morning, the rain had stopped completely. Floodwaters began their slow recession, revealing mud-caked streets and water-damaged buildings. The emergency was transitioning to recovery, a different phase requiring different approaches, but the same fundamental commitment to service. At the morning briefing, Olivia gathered her key officers to establish priorities for the day ahead. "We'll continue security patrols in evacuated areas," she instructed. "But as waters recede, we'll shift to supporting residents returning to assess damage. Remember, we're not just securing property, we're helping people rebuild their lives." Moore raised her hand. "Ma'am, local authorities are stretched thin for damage assessment teams. We could offer personnel to assist. Many of our officers have engineering and construction backgrounds." "Make it happen, Sergeant," Olivia approved. "Coordinate with city officials to integrate our people into their teams." Davidson spoke. "Next, the community center shelter needs transportation support to help people check on their homes and retrieve essential items. I'd like to organize shuttle services using our non-tactical vehicles. Approved. Work with Miller to establish routes and schedules. As the officers dispersed to their assignments, Sullivan remained behind, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You look pleased with yourself, Major," Olivia observed. "Not with myself, ma'am, with them." He gestured toward the departing officers. "When you assigned Moore, Davidson, and Miller to those community roles, I thought you were being optimistic to the point of naivete. I didn't think people could change that fundamentally in such a short time." "People don't change fundamentally," Olivia corrected. "They remember who they really are when given the right conditions to do so. Everyone who joins military police starts with the desire to protect and serve. Sometimes that gets buried under misguided priorities or flawed leadership. And Captain Reynolds, he was the most resistant to your changes." "Sometimes the hardest shells protect the most vulnerable cores," Olivia replied. "Reynolds cared too much, so he built defenses against caring at all. Once those defenses cracked, his true character emerged. In the days that followed Fort Sullivan's military police became an integral part of Sullivan Creek's recovery efforts. They transitioned from emergency response to community support, helping residents clean mud from homes, delivering supplies to isolated areas, and maintaining security without the heavy-handed approach that had once characterized their presence. 2 weeks after the flood, Mayor Harrison hosted a community appreciation dinner at Sullivan Creek High School, the same gymnasium that had served as an emergency shelter, now transformed with tables, decorations, and a banner reading, "Thank you, Fort Sullivan." Olivia watched with quiet satisfaction as her officers mingled comfortably with community members, no longer separate and authoritarian, but integrated and supportive. Moore chatted easily with city officials, discussing improvements to emergency coordination. Davidson helped serve food alongside the high school ROTC students he'd been mentoring. Miller moved between tables, checking on elderly residents he'd helped evacuate during the crisis. Captain Reynolds approached her, looking more at ease than she'd ever seen him. "The mayor wants to establish a permanent liaison committee between base security and local emergency services," he reported. "Monthly meetings, joint training exercises, integrated communication systems. Your recommendation?" Olivia asked, already knowing the answer but wanting to hear it from him. "Full support and participation," Reynolds replied without hesitation. "It's exactly the kind of integration that makes both communities stronger." Olivia nodded her approval. "Make it happen, Captain." As the evening progressed, Mayor Harrison called for attention, tapping a glass to quiet the room. "We've gathered tonight to thank our neighbors from Fort Sullivan for their extraordinary assistance during our recent crisis," he began. "But I want to acknowledge something more significant than a single emergency response. I want to recognize a transformation." The room grew quieter, community members and military personnel alike listening intently. "For years, the relationship between our town and the base has been complicated at best, adversarial at worst," Harrison continued candidly. "We viewed each other with suspicion rather than as partners. That changed during this crisis, not just because of extraordinary circumstances, but because of extraordinary leadership." He gestured toward Olivia. "Lieutenant Colonel Reeves, would you join me?" Olivia moved forward, uncomfortable with personal recognition but understanding its importance for institutional relationships. "When Colonel Reeves arrived at Fort Sullivan just weeks ago, few of us knew what to expect," Harrison said. "I certainly never expected to witness such a profound shift in how military police interact with our community. But true leadership isn't about maintaining the status quo. It's about having the courage to change course when current methods aren't serving the greater good." He turned to address Olivia directly. "You've reminded both your officers and our community that protection doesn't require intimidation. That authority is most effective when exercised with respect and that the greatest strength comes from partnership rather than power. For that, we are profoundly grateful." The applause that followed wasn't merely polite, it was heartfelt, a genuine expression of appreciation from a community that had experienced firsthand the difference that principled leadership could make. Later that evening, as the gathering was concluding, Sergeant Moore approached Olivia with an unexpected request. "Ma'am, do you have a moment? There's someone who'd like to speak with you." Olivia followed Moore to a quiet corner where an elderly woman waited, leaning slightly on a cane. She recognized her as one of the Cedar Ridge residents evacuated during the flood. "Colonel Reeves," the woman said, her voice stronger than her frail appearance suggested. "I wanted to thank you personally. I'm glad we could help during the emergency," Olivia replied. "How are you settling back at Cedar Ridge?" "Very well, thank you. But that's not why I wanted to speak with you." The woman smiled knowingly. "I was a military nurse for 28 years, stationed at bases across the world. I know the difference between soldiers following orders and soldiers following a leader they believe in." She gestured toward the room where officers and community members continued to interact with genuine camaraderie. "What you've accomplished here goes beyond emergency response. You've restored something essential to these young people, a connection to the deeper purpose of their service." Olivia was struck by the woman's perception. "It's still a work in progress. All important things are," the former nurse replied. "But foundations matter. You've rebuilt the foundation for something that will outlast your command here, a culture of service rather than control." As Olivia drove back to base that night, she reflected on those words. Cultural change couldn't be mandated through orders or enforced through discipline. It required creating conditions where people could reconnect with their core values, where they could rediscover the purpose that had initially drawn them to service. 3 months after assuming command, Olivia sat in her office reviewing the quarterly assessment reports. The statistics told a compelling story. Civilian complaints down 78%, use of force incidents reduced by 65%, positive community feedback increased by 82%. But numbers couldn't capture the fundamental transformation she witnessed daily. Officers who had rediscovered pride in their profession, who approached their duties with compassion as well as competence. A knock at her door interrupted her review. Major Sullivan entered with a folder bearing Pentagon insignia. "It's just arrived for you, ma'am. Eyes only." Olivia accepted the folder, recognizing the classification markings that indicated high level command communication. Inside was a brief letter acknowledging her success at Fort Sullivan and offering her a new assignment, leading a comprehensive review of military police training protocols across all Army installations with authority to implement the reforms that had proven so effective under her command. Sullivan watched her expression as she read. "They're noticing what you've accomplished here." "It's what we've accomplished together," Olivia corrected. "Cultural change is never a solo endeavor. Will you accept the new assignment?" Olivia closed the folder thoughtfully. "The work here isn't finished." "No," Sullivan agreed, "but it's taken root. The changes you've implemented aren't dependent on your presence anymore. They've become how we operate, not just what you ordered." That was the true measure of leadership success, creating change that outlasted one's direct authority. Olivia had seen it in how Moore now approached community relations with genuine commitment, in how Davidson mentored young officers with emphasis on service values, in how Miller had become an advocate for respectful community engagement, in how Reynolds had transformed from resistant skeptic to passionate champion for the new approach. "I'll recommend you as my replacement," she told Sullivan. "You understand what we've built here and why it matters." Sullivan nodded, accepting both the compliment and the responsibility it entailed. "What we've learned here deserves to be shared more widely. That's why they're asking for you at this level." Later that day, Olivia walked through the MP headquarters, observing the operations that had transformed under her command. Officers greeted community members with respectful attention. Reports were processed with thorough professionalism. Training sessions emphasized judgment and communication as much as tactical skills. At the main gate, the same checkpoint where her journey at Fort Sullivan had begun with humiliation and misconception, she found a new team of officers processing arrivals with efficient courtesy. No power plays, no unnecessary assertions of authority, just professional service delivered with respect. The gate team snapped to attention when they recognized her, offering sharp salutes that reflected genuine respect rather than mere obligation. "As you were," she said, returning their salutes. "Just observing normal operations." "Yes, ma'am," responded the sergeant in charge, a young officer who had joined the unit after her reforms were underway, who knew only the culture of service she had established rather than the enforcement mentality that preceded it. Olivia smiled slightly, recognizing that this was her true legacy, not just reforming existing officers, but establishing standards that would shape the next generation. The transformation that had begun with 3 problematic officers at a gate checkpoint had rippled outward, changing an entire unit and its relationship with the community it served. Sometimes the most profound changes began with the simplest moments, like being humiliated at a gate by officers who had forgotten why they served, then having the wisdom to see beyond punishment to the possibility of redemption. Not through force or fear, but through reconnection with the core values that had brought them to service in the first place. That was leadership in its truest form, not commanding compliance, but inspiring commitment, not enforcing rules, but embodying values, not controlling behavior, but transforming culture. One officer at a time, one interaction at a time, one remembered purpose at a time. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.